It was a cold winter night, and there I was, alone on a desolate snowy highway, stranded with my car. The engine had decided it had had enough, leaving me in the chilly darkness. With no other option, I fumbled for my phone, fingers trembling as I dialed for roadside assistance. After what felt like an eternity, a voice crackled through the phone, reassuring me that help was on the way. Relieved, I settled back into my car, waiting for the tow truck to arrive. Little did I know, that night was about to take a dark turn. Headlights emerged in the distance, a welcome sight against the silent backdrop of the snow-covered landscape. The tow truck pulled up, and a man stepped out, burly, with a grizzled beard and a weathered cap. He looked like any other tow truck driver, and in that moment, he was my lifeline. As he approached, he didn't exude warmth or friendliness. His eyes were hard, and his movements deliberate. I chalked it up to the bitter cold and my own nerves. I thanked him for coming out in such weather, but his response was curt, lacking the usual professional courtesy. He hooked up the car without a word, the metal clinking in the silence of the night. I stayed in my car, shivering, as he worked in the frigid air. The dim glow of the tow truck's lights cast eerie shadows, and the wind howled through the empty trees. Unease settled in my stomach, an instinctive feeling that something wasn't right. I shook it off as paranoia, telling myself that being alone on a deserted highway at night could make anyone anxious. But as we started to move, my unease intensified. The tow truck rumbled along the desolate road, and I stared out into the dark expanse. It wasn't long before I realized that we were heading in the wrong direction. Panic gripped me, my senses screamed that something was horribly amiss. I questioned the driver, but he brushed off my concerns with a dismissive grunt. As we ventured farther away from the highway, I pressed the button to lower my window, the frigid air rushing in. Desperation fueled my actions as I screamed for him to stop. He ignored me, the truck continuing its ominous journey into the lonely wilderness. My heart raced as I fumbled for my phone, dialing the authorities. The operator's voice offered a lifeline in the darkness, but the truck driver seemed unfazed. He spoke cryptically, his words sending shivers down my spine. He knew I was calling for help. Fear nodded me, and I wondered how I had gone from a simple breakdown on the highway to a nightmare unfolding in the snowy wilderness. The tow truck driver, now more menacing than ever, didn't respond to my pleas or the operator's inquiries. As the minutes dragged on, I saw a glimmer of hope in the distance, the flashing lights of a police car. Relief washed over me, and I frantically gestured to the approaching vehicle. The tow truck driver, realizing his game was up, abruptly pulled over. The police car parked behind us, and two officers stepped out, their authoritative presence a welcome sight. I stumbled out of the tow truck, the cold air biting at my skin. The officers, sensing my distress, asked me what had happened. I recounted the strange journey, the tow truck driver's ominous demeanor, and the unsettling detour into the isolated wilderness. The officers exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from curiosity to concern. They approached the tow truck driver, who now wore a veneer of innocence. He claimed it was all a misunderstanding, that he had taken a shortcut to avoid traffic. But the officers weren't convinced. They asked him questions that I couldn't hear, their voices hushed. In the end, they arrested the tow truck driver. The cuffs clicked, sealing his fate. The officers explained that he had a history of preying on vulnerable individuals stranded on remote roads, taking advantage of their desperation. As I watched the tow truck driver being led away, a chilling realization settled in. I had narrowly escaped a fate I couldn't comprehend. The snowy highway, once just a path home, had become a perilous journey into the clutches of a man with nefarious intentions. The officers ensured I got the help I needed, arranging for a legitimate tow truck to take me and my car to safety. I sat in the warmth of the police car, my hands still trembling. The snowy landscape outside transformed from a threatening wilderness to a canvas of silent gratitude. I was on this night bus, just trying to get home. Snowstorm hit out of nowhere, and the driver said we had to stop until it cleared. No choice, we were stuck in the middle of nowhere, no town in sight. It was freezing inside, and the windows were all fogged up. People started getting antsy, wondering how long we'd be stuck there. At first, everyone was quiet, just waiting it out. But as the hours passed, tension started to build. People were getting restless, pacing up and down the aisle. The heat wasn't working right, and some folks were blaming each other for it. Small arguments broke out, nothing serious, just people being annoyed. Then someone pointed out we were running low on snacks. The bus was stocked for a regular trip, not a snowed-in nightmare. People got upset, demanding answers from the driver. He didn't have any, just said we had to wait it out. That's when the real trouble started. A couple of guys, big blokes, decided to take charge. They started rationing the snacks, saying we needed to conserve until help arrived. Some folks were okay with it, but others started getting agitated. A woman in the back started yelling, saying she paid for her ticket and they couldn't just take the food. The big guys tried to keep order, but it wasn't working. The bus turned into chaos, with people arguing and pushing. It got real ugly, real fast. I kept my head down, just hoping it would blow over. But it didn't. Someone accused a guy in the front of hoarding snacks in his bag. It escalated from there. People were accusing each other of stealing, of being selfish. I saw a lady crying in the corner, scared out of her mind. The driver couldn't do anything, just watched as the passengers turned on each other. Then, one of the big guys, the self-appointed leader, decided to search everyone's bags. It was a nightmare. People were yelling, refusing to be searched. I thought someone was going to throw a punch. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. I stayed quiet, hoping they wouldn't bother with me. But they got to the guy next to me, started going through his bag. They found some snacks, and that was it. The bus erupted. They accused him of stealing, said he was the reason we were in this mess. It got physical real quick. I tried to intervene, told them to calm down, but they turned on me too. It was like a mob, all pent-up frustration and fear unleashed. They started pushing and shoving, accusing everyone in sight. I was scared for my life. I've never seen people turn on each other like that. The driver finally stepped in, threatened to call the cops if they didn't settle down. It took a while, but eventually, things quieted down. The atmosphere on that bus was icy, though. No one spoke, and the fear hung in the air. We were still stuck, but the real storm was inside that bus. As the night dragged on, we were all just sitting there in silence, each person lost in their own thoughts. The snow continued to fall outside, and the bus sat there like a cold, metal coffin. I never thought a simple bus ride could turn into something straight out of a nightmare. We rented this cabin up in the Canadian wilderness, thinking it would be a cool winter getaway. Just some friends wanting a break from the routine, you know? The place was pretty isolated, surrounded by towering pines and covered in a thick blanket of snow. The perfect setting for a cozy, memorable weekend. The cabin looked rustic but charming, a wooden retreat nestled in the quiet forest. We had plans for snowball fights, board games, and all the typical winter stuff. The first day went smooth, laughter echoing through the woods as we enjoyed the pristine landscape. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, things took an unexpected turn. It was around midnight, and we were huddled inside, sharing stories and laughing, when we heard the distant howl of a wolf. No big deal, right? Just nature doing its thing. But then, another sound joined the chorus, human voices. At first, we thought it might be fellow campers or locals. Curiosity got the better of us, and we decided to investigate. Outside, the air was biting cold, and our flashlights cast long shadows on the snow. We followed the voices, thinking we'd stumble upon some late-night hunters or maybe even another cabin. The forest, though, became eerily silent as we ventured deeper, the snow muffling our footsteps. Suddenly, we spotted two figures in the distance. At first, we thought they were just regular hunters, but something about their demeanor set us on edge. They were near our cabin, examining it almost too closely. Our flashlights caught the glint of rifles slung over their shoulders. As we approached, they turned toward us, their eyes reflecting an unsettling glimmer. One of them had a long, unkempt beard, and the other wore a tattered hat pulled low. They didn't say a word, just stared at us like we were intruders. "Hey, what are you guys doing here?" one of my friends called out, trying to sound friendly. No response. Just this lingering silence that made the forest feel heavy. I noticed their eyes were fixed on us, scanning the group as if assessing something. The tension hung thick in the air, and I could sense the unease rippling through my friends. It was then that I saw it, a hint of something dark in their expressions. One of the hunters finally spoke, a slow drawl in his voice. He asked about where we were from, what we were doing here. Normal questions, but his eyes told a different story. It was like he was sizing us up, figuring out whether we were a threat or something else. As the conversation awkwardly continued, I caught the glint of a knife strapped to the other hunter's belt. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. These guys weren't just harmless locals or lost campers. They were something else entirely, and the forest seemed to close in around us. We made some excuse about needing to get back to the cabin, trying not to betray the fear gnawing in our insides. As we retreated, their eyes followed us, and I swear I heard a low chuckle. It wasn't a friendly sound, more like the prelude to something sinister. Back at the cabin, we locked every door and window, exchanging worried glances. The distant howls of wolves now felt like a warning, a symphony of nature cautioning us about the two strangers lurking in the dark. We spent the night in anxious silence, listening for any signs of the hunters approaching. Each creak of the cabin settling in the cold made us jump, our nerves stretched thin. Morning finally came, the sunlight bringing a sense of relief, but the memory of those hunters lingered. We decided to cut our trip short, packing up with a speed I hadn't known we were capable of. It was one of those bitterly cold nights when the snow blankets everything, muffling sounds and making the world feel strangely quiet. I was on the night shift, just another paramedic responding to emergencies in the biting chill. The radio crackled with a call about a possible heart attack in an old house on the outskirts of town. Sounded routine, just another night. The dispatcher warned about the snowstorm, but duty called, and I drove through the swirling snowflakes. The wind howled, making the journey eerie, like I was moving through a frozen ghost town. The GPS led me to this isolated, dilapidated house, standing silent against the relentless storm. There was an otherworldly hush as I approached the front door. The porch light flickered, barely holding onto life. The wind seemed to whisper through the cracks in the wood, making the whole place feel like it was holding its breath. I hesitated before knocking, the sound echoing strangely in the stillness. No response. I knocked again, louder this time, but the only answer was the creaking of the house in the wind. It felt abandoned, forgotten, like a relic from a bygone era. Yet, the call had come from here. My instincts tingled, that uneasy feeling crawling up my spine. With a deep breath, I tried the doorknob. Surprisingly, it turned, and the door creaked open. Cold air swept through the entryway, and a musty smell hit me. I stepped inside, the dim glow of my flashlight revealing a scene frozen in time. The furniture was draped in dusty sheets, like the occupants had left in a hurry, or never returned. Cobwebs clung to the corners, and the air hung heavy with neglect. I called out, my voice swallowed by the vast emptiness of the house. I followed the sound of a faint moan, my boots echoing in the empty halls. The flashlight danced across faded wallpaper and peeling paint, creating eerie shadows that played tricks on my mind. Every step felt like a whisper in the haunted silence of that frozen domain. I reached the staircase, the wood groaning under my weight. The moan grew louder, leading me to a door ajar. I pushed it open, revealing a room steeped in darkness. The flashlight revealed a figure lying on a bed, tangled in sheets, their face contorted in pain. The patient was conscious but incoherent, mumbling words that made no sense. My eyes, however, were drawn to something else. The walls were adorned with photographs, not family portraits, but gruesome images of lifeless bodies. Panic gripped me as I realized these weren't staged, they were real. A sickening realization settled in my stomach. I stumbled back, my flashlight shaking in my hand. The person on the bed wasn't the victim, they were the perpetrator. The emergency call was a trap, drawing me into this macabre display. I fumbled for my radio, my voice shaking as I called for backup. The moans from the bed now felt like a sinister melody, the snowstorm outside muffling the approaching sirens. I kept my eyes on the patient, fear and disbelief warring within me. As the backup arrived, the truth unfolded. This seemingly abandoned house was a chamber of horrors, a grotesque stage where the lines between victim and villain blurred. We were a group of friends seeking a thrill, a snowmobile tour under the Arctic Circle's night sky. The promise of vast, untouched landscapes bathed in the glow of the northern lights was too alluring to resist. Our guide, a weathered man with a thick beard, exuded confidence, assuring us of a unique experience. As we revved up the snowmobiles, the cold Arctic air pierced through our layers. The engines roared to life, drowning the sound of our excitement. The night was dark, the stars obscured by thick clouds. We followed the guide, our headlights cutting through the Arctic silence. But as the minutes turned into an hour, I felt a gnawing suspicion. We had strayed far from the expected route. The guide, usually communicative, became strangely silent. The wind carried whispers of doubt, a creeping unease that threaded through the group. I nudged my friend, questioning our guide's intentions. He brushed it off, attributing it to paranoia in the cold vastness. Yet, something wasn't right. The Arctic night seemed to swallow us whole, our snowmobiles weaving through a labyrinth of snow-laden trees. The temperature plummeted, the air biting through our protective layers. Panic began to creep in as frost formed on our visors. The guide's snowmobile led us further into a desolate landscape, a frozen purgatory with no signs of life. I mustered the courage to confront the guide, his silhouette barely visible in the Arctic gloom. He deflected my questions with vague answers, insisting we were on an alternate route for a spectacular view. But the landscape was devoid of the promised beauty. The Arctic wind whispered secrets of betrayal, and the group huddled together, sharing worried glances. The guide's intentions remained shrouded, his words failing to quell the growing fear. As the temperature dropped further, our snowmobiles sputtered and groaned, the engines protesting the harsh conditions. My fingers felt numb as I gripped the handlebars, the cold seeping through gloves and biting into my skin. The headlights cast eerie shadows on the snow, playing tricks on our strained nerves. We were lost in a desolate Arctic wilderness, and the guide's hidden agenda became a glaring truth. Communication was sparse, limited to desperate murmurs and silent exchanges. The Arctic night, once a canvas for the dance of the northern lights, now stretched endlessly, an abyss of uncertainty. The guide's face remained hidden beneath layers of clothing, his intentions veiled in the frozen darkness. A feeling of betrayal hung heavy in the air as we confronted the bitter reality. Our guide had led us astray, abandoning the well-trodden path for an unknown, treacherous journey. The Arctic Circle, usually a realm of natural wonders, became a silent witness to our struggle against the cold and the guide's hidden motives. The snowmobiles groaned to a halt, their engines succumbing to the brutal Arctic cold. Panic set in as we faced the prospect of being stranded, far from any known landmarks. The guide's hidden agenda unfolded in the harsh Arctic night, and survival became our only priority in this desolate, frozen landscape. Once we finally got back to safety, we was worse for wear. We will never forget that experience, and it will forever haunt us. It was the kind of winter night that chills you to the bone, the wind howling through the trees like a ghostly wail. My car, a battered relic from the early 2000s, had succumbed to the relentless snowstorm that had blindsided me on a deserted stretch of highway. With no sign of rescue in sight, I trudged through knee-deep snow until a flickering light emerged on the horizon, a lonely gas station. Relief washed over me as I stumbled towards the worn-out building, the crunch of snow beneath my boots the only sound in the desolate night. The gas station looked like it hadn't seen customers in years, a forgotten outpost on the edge of nowhere. The windows were smeared with grime, and the neon sign flickered in a half-hearted attempt to beckon travelers. As I entered, the door creaked on its rusty hinges, and a wave of warmth hit me. The small bell above the entrance jingled, announcing my arrival. The man behind the counter, his face etched with age and weariness, glanced up from a tattered newspaper. His eyes, sunken and weary, met mine, and I felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold. Finish this story where he escapes. I approached the counter, my frozen fingers fumbling for the words to explain my situation. The attendant, a man of few words, nodded solemnly and handed me a cup of lukewarm coffee from a decaying pot. The flickering fluorescent lights overhead hummed a discordant melody as the wind outside howled its relentless tune. The gas station seemed frozen in time, a relic from another era, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The walls, adorned with peeling advertisements and faded calendars, closed in on me like a vice. The air smelled of dampness and neglect, and a low hum vibrated through the building, an unsettling undercurrent beneath the surface. As I sipped the bitter coffee, the attendant's gaze never wavered. His eyes bore into mine, and a sense of unease settled in the pit of my stomach. I tried to make small talk, asking about the weather and the condition of the roads, but his responses were curt, his attention elsewhere. An old television in the corner crackled to life, its screen flickering with static. The news anchor's voice, distorted and distant, spoke of a serial killer on the loose in the area. My heart quickened, the warmth of the gas station now replaced by a cold sweat. I scanned the room, my eyes landing on a door behind the counter. My curiosity got the better of me, and I mustered the courage to ask about it. The attendant's eyes darkened, a flicker of something sinister passing across his face. He dismissed my question with a grunt, but the air grew thicker with tension. As the storm raged outside, I felt a growing urgency to leave, to escape the oppressive atmosphere of the gas station. I thanked the attendant and made my way to the door, the bell above jingling once more. But just as I thought I was free, the attendant's voice, icy and menacing, sliced through the air. "You can't leave. Not until the storm passes." I turned, dread pooling in my stomach. The door slammed shut, the wind outside roaring in agreement. The attendant's dark secret revealed itself. I was trapped in this frozen nightmare, at the mercy of a man with a hidden agenda, and the storm showed no signs of mercy. I knew I had to escape and made one more attempt. Ignoring the attendant's ominous warning, I approached the door with determination. The bell jingled as I pushed it open, the biting cold wind cutting through the station's warmth. The storm outside had intensified, snowflakes swirling in a blinding dance. I trudged through the knee-deep snow, my eyes squinting against the icy onslaught. The gas station's dim lights flickered in the distance, a feeble beacon guiding me through the white expanse. With each step, the wind whispered warnings, and my surroundings seemed to blur. The gas station, the attendant, the oppressive atmosphere, they all melted into a disorienting fog. Doubt crept in, and I questioned the reality of my escape. Was this a nightmare from which I couldn't wake? I pressed forward, driven by the desperate need to break free from the gas station's sinister grasp. The snow, now waist-deep, clung to me like a suffocating shroud. A chilling realization struck: I might not make it out alive. The gas station's lights flickered more urgently as I approached, creating an eerie glow against the relentless storm. I reached for the door, my frozen fingers grappling with the handle. It resisted, as if the building itself fought to keep me within its icy clutches. With a final burst of strength, I forced the door open. The bell jingled, its sound swallowed by the wind's mournful howl. I stumbled outside, gasping for breath in the biting cold. The snow whipped around me, a malevolent force trying to pull me back. As I trudged through the relentless storm, the gas stations glowed dim behind me. Doubt lingered, and the shadows cast by the swirling snow played tricks on my mind. I felt pursued, as if unseen eyes bore into my back. The journey through the blizzard felt endless, my body aching with every step. Yet, determination fueled my escape. I pressed on, guided by the distant lights of other cars stranded on the highway. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, I stumbled upon a kindred soul, a fellow traveler seeking refuge in this frozen wasteland. Together, we faced the storm, each step leading us further from the gas station's icy clutches. As we reached the safety of a cluster of stranded vehicles, the storm's intensity began to wane. I turned back for a fleeting glance at the distant gas station, its lights now feeble against the receding tempest. The attendant's ominous warning echoed in my mind, but I had broken free from that frozen nightmare, the taste of bitter coffee and the lingering hum of the gas station fading into the storm's fading echoes. I was out there in the national park, doing my usual ranger patrol during winter. Snow everywhere, quiet as hell. That's when I saw something strange near one of the trails. A couple of tire tracks leading off into the trees. I thought, who the hell is dumb enough to be driving around here in the snow? I followed the tracks on foot, just to check it out. Deeper in the woods, I found a makeshift camp. Tents, crates, all sorts of gear scattered around. It looked dodgy. And then, I saw it. Piles of animal carcasses, furs, and God knows what else. Poaching, I reckon. These bastards were exploiting the park. I radioed it in, let them know what I found. Figured I'd wait for backup before doing anything more. But as I was waiting, I heard footsteps approaching. Quiet, like they knew how to move through the snow without making a sound. I crouched down, trying to blend into the trees. Out of nowhere, 3 guys in camouflage gear stepped into view. I could see the guns slung over their shoulders. They spotted me and just stared for a second, sizing me up. One of them, a big dude with a scruffy beard, smirks like he's won the lottery. He starts walking towards me, telling me to mind my own damn business. I tell him I'm a ranger, and this is my business. That's when things got real tense. The other 2 guys, they fan out, surrounding me. Scruffy beard keeps coming closer, telling me to back off, that I don't know who I'm messing with. I'm thinking, maybe I can talk my way out of this. But then Scruffy beard pulls out a knife. No talking now. He lunges at me, and I stumble back, my hand reaching for my radio to call for help. But one of his buddies knocks it out of my hand, and suddenly, I'm alone, unarmed, in the middle of the woods with these lunatics. Scruffy Beard takes a swing at me with the knife, and I manage to dodge it, but I can feel the wind as it cuts through the air. I'm thinking, this is it, I'm done for. The other two guys are closing in, and I can see in their eyes, they're enjoying this. I make a run for it, ducking and weaving through the trees. I can hear them chasing me, laughing, taunting. I can't radio for help, and I sure as hell can't outrun 3 armed maniacs. My only chance is to lose them in the woods, hope they give up. I take a sharp turn, trying to be as quiet as I can. I hide behind a massive pine tree, praying they didn't see which way I went. I hold my breath, listening. The snow crunches under their boots as they pass by, still yapping about how they're going to teach me a lesson. I wait until they're a bit farther away before making my move. I start moving again, slow and steady, trying not to make a sound. I know I can't make it back to my patrol car without them spotting me, so I head deeper into the forest, hoping to find some sort of refuge. After what feels like forever, I stumble upon an old ranger cabin. I slip inside, locking the door behind me. It's freezing in there, but at least I'm safe, for now. I can hear them outside, still searching, but they haven't found me yet. I sit in the darkness, trying to catch my breath. I know I can't stay in that cabin forever, but I need a plan. I wait for what feels like hours, and finally, the voices fade away. I figure they gave up, thinking they scared me off. Carefully, I make my way back to my patrol car, hidden in the shadows. I radio for backup and tell them everything. They arrive, and we go back to the campsite together, but those poachers are long gone. The evidence is still there, though, the animal carcasses, the tents, the mess they left behind. It's a sobering reminder of how dangerous this job can be. I'll never forget those guys, the look in their eyes. They were willing to do whatever it took to protect their illegal operation. I still patrol the national park, but now, I'm always on edge, never knowing what might be lurking in the snowy wilderness. I used to work the night shift at the factory. It's a lonely place when the machines are your only companions, their rhythmic hum drowning out any semblance of life. I didn't mind, though. The pay was decent, and the solitude suited my introverted nature. One night, as the machines droned on, I noticed a coworker, Alan, acting strangely. He had this jittery look, like he was hiding something. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to investigate. Maybe it was just the exhaustion playing tricks on my mind, but something felt off. I followed Alan discreetly through the cold, labyrinthine halls of the factory. The fluorescent lights flickered intermittently, casting eerie shadows that danced on the metal walls. It was like a scene from a horror movie, but I shook off the unease, telling myself it was just nerves. Alan led me to a secluded corner of the factory, away from the prying eyes of security cameras. As I peered around the corner, my heart skipped a beat. He was huddled over something, a small, nondescript box. The dim light revealed a twisted smile on his face, a malevolence that chilled me to the bone. I couldn't make out what he was doing, but the air crackled with tension. It felt like stumbling upon a secret I wasn't meant to know. A strange sense of dread washed over me, and I contemplated whether I should retreat or confront him. Curiosity, however, urged me to stay and uncover the mystery. My heart pounded in my chest as I observed Alan meticulously arranging something inside the box. It was then that I noticed a faint smell, metallic, like copper mixed with something else. My mind raced through possibilities, each one more disturbing than the last. In a moment of fear and irrationality, I accidentally knocked over a stack of empty crates. The clatter echoed through the empty halls, freezing both Alan and me in place. His head snapped in my direction, eyes wide with a mixture of surprise and anger. The air grew thick with tension as our eyes locked. I could sense his mind working, calculating whether he could trust me with his secret. Panic clawed in my throat as I debated whether to flee or confront him. The factory seemed to close in around us, the oppressive silence broken only by the hum of the machines. Alan took a step toward me, a predatory glint in his eyes. Fear gripped me, urging me to escape, but my legs felt like lead. He grinned, revealing a set of teeth that seemed sharper than usual. That moment felt like an eternity, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. Suddenly, he lunged at me, and instinct took over. I sprinted through the labyrinthine halls, the machines a cacophony behind me. Fear fueled my every step as I navigated the maze, desperate to put distance between me and whatever dark secret Alan harbored. As I rounded a corner, I spotted the exit door. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. The door wouldn't budge. Panic set in as I fumbled with the lock, my trembling hands struggling to find purchase. The factory's silence now felt oppressive, suffocating. I heard his footsteps closing in, the click-clack echoing through the hall. The metallic smell grew stronger, now mixed with a sickly sweetness that made my stomach churn. With a final desperate push, the door creaked open, and I stumbled out into the crisp night air. The cool breeze offered a brief respite, but the fear lingered. I dared not look back, my imagination running wild with the horrors that might be chasing me. I ran until I reached the main road, where I finally felt safe enough to stop and catch my breath. I never went back to that factory. The mystery of Alan's dark secret remains unresolved, but I can still feel the weight of his malevolence in my nightmares. I lived in this small mountain town where the winters were harsh. Snow piled up, turning everything into a quiet, white wonderland. But one winter, something changed. I got on the wrong side of this snowplow driver, Hank. No idea why he took a dislike to me, but from that day on, my life turned into a nightmare. It started innocently enough. I'd see Hank around town, giving me these menacing looks. I thought maybe I was just being paranoid, but the feeling wouldn't go away. Then one day, my driveway got blocked by a massive wall of snow. I had to shovel for hours to clear a path. I figured it was just bad luck, but it kept happening. I'd hear that rumble of the snowplow in the distance, and I knew my day was about to get worse. Hank would come through, pushing snow right into my driveway. It was deliberate, no doubt about it. I confronted him once, asked him what the hell his problem was. He just laughed, this cold, heartless laugh that sent shivers down my spine. Things escalated. The town was small, everyone knew everyone, but nobody wanted to get involved. Hank had this power trip going on, using that snowplow like a weapon. My car got buried more times than I could count, and every time I cleared it, he'd be back the next day. One night, after a fresh snowfall, I got a call from a neighbor. They said Hank was outside my house, revving the plow engine like a madman. I rushed to the window and saw him, this crazy look in his eyes. I locked the doors, but he just circled the house, revving that damn snowplow engine over and over. The next day, I decided I'd had enough. I reported him to the authorities, but they couldn't do much without concrete evidence. It only made things worse. Hank started following me around, showing up wherever I went. The whole town was like a pressure cooker, waiting to explode. One night, as I was heading home, I saw Hank parked outside my house. I called the police, but he was gone by the time they arrived. I couldn't take it anymore. I packed a bag and decided to stay at a friend's place in the next town over. I thought I'd be safe there, away from the mountains and Hank's madness. But as I drove down that winding mountain road, I saw the headlights in my rearview mirror. It was Hank, tailing me like a predator closing in on its prey. My heart raced, and I floored it, trying to shake him off. The road was slippery, and the snow made it treacherous. I took a turn too fast, skidding off the road and into a ditch. I scrambled out of the car, desperate to escape, but Hank pulled up behind me, blocking any chance of getting away. He stepped out of the plow, a sinister grin on his face. I begged him to stop, to end this madness, but he just raised a tire iron and swung it at me. I managed to dodge the first blow, but he kept coming. The snow around us turned red as the struggle continued. I fought for my life, grappling with this madman in the freezing cold. The blows kept coming, and I felt the pain, each strike bringing me closer to the edge. I don't know how I did it, but I managed to break free and stumbled into the woods. Hank, fueled by rage, chased after me. It was a nightmarish game of cat and mouse in the snow-covered forest. I could hear him getting closer, his heavy breaths mixing with the eerie silence of the woods. I found a hiding spot, praying he wouldn't find me. The snow fell around me, muffling the sounds of our struggle. I stayed hidden, holding my breath as he passed by. Hours felt like minutes, and I wondered if I'd make it out alive. Eventually, the sounds of Hank's rage faded away. I stayed hidden until I was sure he was gone. The cold gnawed at me, but fear kept me still. When I finally dared to emerge, the forest was silent once more. I stumbled through the snow, battered and bruised, desperate to put distance between me and that nightmare. I made it down the mountain, hitched a ride to the nearest town, and reported everything to the police. They arrested Hank, but the scars, both physical and emotional, remained. My wife and I decided to take a winter vacation in the Pyrenees, staying at this remote ski chalet. The place was isolated, surrounded by snow-covered mountains. It seemed like the perfect getaway, a chance to escape the hustle and bustle. Little did we know what awaited us. The chalet owner, a guy named Jacques, greeted us warmly. He seemed friendly enough, giving us a quick tour and making sure we were comfortable. But there was something off about him, a strange glint in his eyes. We brushed it off, thinking we were just being paranoid. The first night was peaceful. We cozied up by the fireplace, enjoying the quiet. But as the night wore on, we heard faint whispers outside. We thought it was the wind playing tricks, but there was an unsettling vibe in the air. I peeked out the window, but the snowfall had erased any trace of the source. The next morning, we decided to explore the surroundings. The mountains were breathtaking, but there was a heaviness in the air. We chatted with Jacques about the local area, and he casually mentioned a series of unsolved disappearances that had occurred in the region over the years. It sent a chill down my spine, but I figured it was just a tale to add some mystery to the place. As the days passed, things got weirder. We noticed Jacques acting peculiar, watching us when he thought we weren't looking. There were odd sounds at night, like footsteps in the snow, but when we checked, there was no one around. The sense of isolation turned from comforting to unnerving. One evening, we found an old newspaper tucked away in a drawer. It detailed the disappearances Jacques had mentioned earlier. The dates matched our stay, and photos of the missing people sent shivers down our spines. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that someone was monitoring our every move. Late one night, we woke to the sound of distant cries echoing through the mountains. My wife was terrified, and truth be told, so was I. We considered leaving, but the snowstorm outside had intensified, trapping us in that ominous chalet. We felt like prey, surrounded by an unseen predator. As days passed, the whispers grew louder. We started finding strange notes, cryptic messages hinting at dark secrets. I confronted Shock, demanding answers. He denied any involvement, but his eyes told a different story. Paranoia consumed us, and we started questioning our sanity. One night, as we lay awake, the whispers became voices. Unintelligible words that seemed to dance on the edge of comprehension. We stumbled outside, drawn by an invisible force. In the moonlit snow, we saw figures, shadows moving in the darkness. Panic set in, and we rushed back inside. The following day, we decided to investigate the disappearances ourselves. Shock had left for the day, giving us the perfect opportunity. We combed through his belongings, finding maps with marked locations matching the missing person's last known whereabouts. It was chilling evidence connecting him to the unsolved cases. Just as we were about to confront Shock, he returned, his demeanor shifting from friendly to menacing. He accused us of snooping, his eyes gleaming with a disturbing intensity. We were trapped with a possible predator in the middle of nowhere, and the situation was escalating. In a desperate attempt to escape, we braved the snowstorm. We stumbled through the mountains, the wind howling around us, and the snow biting our faces. Exhausted and freezing, we finally reached a neighboring village and reported everything to the authorities. The investigation that followed uncovered a horrifying truth. Shock was linked to the disappearances, using the remote chalet as a base for his crimes. The voices in the night were the echoes of his victims, haunting the snowy landscape. We never fully escaped the trauma of that winter in the Pyrenees. The serene beauty of the mountains concealed a dark and chilling secret. It was a cold night, snow falling in thick flakes, covering the city in a quiet blanket. I was driving my cab, the engine humming softly against the backdrop of the winter storm. Business was slow, and I was about to call it a night when a figure emerged from the shadows, waving me down. I pulled over, and she climbed into the back seat. Her face was hidden beneath a hood, and the way she moved seemed tense. She gave me an address, a rundown part of town. As we drove, I tried to make small talk, but she stayed silent, staring out into the snowy night. The streets were deserted, only the distant glow of streetlights cutting through the falling snow. I could feel the tension in the air, a strange vibe that made my skin crawl. I glanced at the rearview mirror, trying to catch a glimpse of her face, but it remained obscured. As we approached the destination, I noticed a police car parked nearby. My unease grew, but I parked as instructed. The woman handed me the fare, the bills cold to the touch. She got out, disappearing into the shadows without a word. Curiosity gnawed me, and I decided to wait a bit before leaving. I watched as she approached the police car. The officers seemed surprised to see her, exchanging words that I couldn't hear over the wind. They eventually let her into the car, and it drove away. Shrugging off the weird encounter, I continued my night. It wasn't until the next morning that I learned about a series of chilling crimes in the city. The news was all over it, a string of mysterious disappearances, unsolved murders that had left the community on edge. A few days later, another snowy night, I found myself near that same part of town. I saw her again, the mysterious passenger, standing in the shadows. Against my instincts, I pulled over. She got in, the same tense silence between us. She gave me another address, a different part of town this time. As we drove, my mind raced. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was somehow connected to the crimes. Maybe she witnessed something, or maybe she was involved. My palms grew sweaty as I drove through the city, wondering if I should alert the police. The destination was an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. I hesitated, my instinct screaming at me to get out of there. She paid the fare and got out, disappearing into the dark building. I couldn't let it go this time. I parked a safe distance away and called the police, telling them everything. I watched as they arrived, surrounding the warehouse. My heart pounded in my chest as they entered, uncertain of what they might find. Minutes felt like hours as I waited. Eventually, the officers emerged, leading out a group of people in handcuffs. Among them was the mysterious passenger. Her had finally pulled back to reveal a face that sent shivers down my spine. The news later reported a breakthrough in the case. The people arrested were responsible for the chilling crimes that had haunted the city. The mysterious passenger was a witness turned key to solving the mystery, a silent hero in the darkness. That snowy night stayed with me, a mix of fear and relief. It made me realize that sometimes the line between normal and terrifying can be as thin as the layer of snow covering the city. I worked as a dispatcher for the local snowplow service in this mountain town. It was a regular gig, coordinating the plows during heavy snowfall. One winter, though, things got strange. It started when I noticed the plows weren't following their usual routes. They were clearing paths to specific locations, and it seemed intentional. I thought it was odd but brushed it off as maybe a change in strategy. The town was small, and any change was noticeable. The more I observed, the more suspicious it got. The plows weren't just clearing roads, they were creating pathways to isolated spots, places rarely visited even during regular times. It gave me an eerie feeling, like something was off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. One day, curiosity got the better of me. I decided to investigate. I waited until the plows went out, then tracked their movements on the map. The paths they were clearing formed a pattern, leading to a secluded area deep in the mountains. It was a place rarely ventured into, especially during winter. I contacted a buddy who worked on one of the plows, trying to get some info. He was hesitant, but he mentioned whispers among the crew about getting extra cash for these secret plowing jobs. I pressed him, but he clammed up, afraid of getting involved. I couldn't shake the feeling that something nefarious was going on. Late one night, I decided to drive up to that secluded area. The snow was thick, making the journey slow and treacherous. My headlights cut through the darkness, revealing the snow-covered landscape. As I approached the destination, I saw figures moving in the shadows. My heart raced, and I parked the car a safe distance away, watching from the shadows. The plows had created a path leading to a large, abandoned building, a place that had no business being accessible in the middle of winter. I stayed hidden, trying to make sense of what was happening. People emerged from the building, carrying bags and exchanging hushed conversations. It hit me like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just about plowing paths, it was a cover for something illegal. I snapped a few pictures with my phone, capturing the clandestine activities. My hands trembled as I watched, realizing I was witnessing a plot unfolding right in our quiet mountain town. Fear crept in as I pondered what kind of operation required such secrecy and precision. As I backed away, my foot hit a loose rock, causing a small noise. The figures turned towards me, and panic set in. I sprinted back to my car, heart pounding, the cold air burning my lungs. I drove back to town in a frenzy, fearing that I had become an unintended witness. Once I got home, I debated whether to go to the police. The fear of retribution gnawed at me, but the sense of responsibility won. I handed over the evidence and my account of the night. The police assured me they would investigate, but the tension in the air grew thick. Days later, news broke about a major drug operation busted in the mountains. The plowed paths led to a hidden processing facility, a hub for illegal activities. The arrests sent shockwaves through the town, revealing a dark underbelly that had been thriving beneath the snowy surface. The plow crew, unknowingly involved in the operation, was questioned and, to some extent, cleared of intentional involvement. It turned out the plow drivers were just following orders, unaware of the illicit activities happening in the remote building. The bust changed the town forever. It exposed the vulnerabilities beneath the pristine snow and shattered the illusion of a peaceful mountain community. Even as life returned to normal, the memory of that winter lingered, a chilling reminder that danger could hide in the most unexpected places. It was a winter night, snow falling in thick flakes, covering the world in a cold, white blanket. I was home alone, cozy by the fireplace, lost in a book. The wind howled outside, creating an eerie symphony that matched the isolation of the night. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. It wasn't a regular, polite knock. It was forceful, demanding attention. I felt a chill run down my spine. Who could be knocking so aggressively on a night like this? I hesitated, debating whether to answer. The knocks continued, growing louder. Anxiety crawled up my chest, but I mustered the courage to check. I peeked through the curtains, and my heart skipped a beat. A figure stood on the doorstep, obscured by the darkness. I couldn't make out any features, just the silhouette of a person standing there. Fear gripped me, but I opened the door a crack. The stranger was a man, his face hidden beneath a hood. He seemed agitated, mumbling something about needing help. He claimed his car had broken down, and he was stranded in the cold. My instinct screamed at me to be cautious, but sympathy won over. I told him to wait while I fetched a blanket and offered to call for roadside assistance. As I turned to grab my phone, something felt off. I heard footsteps behind me, slow and deliberate. I froze. Panic set in as I realized I was alone with a stranger in my home. I turned slowly, the man now standing in the doorway, his hood pulled back. His eyes were cold and calculating, sending shivers down my spine. He demanded money, claiming he needed it to get his car towed. I felt a knot in my stomach. Something wasn't right. I tried to stay calm, told him I didn't have cash but that I could call for help. He didn't like that. His demeanor shifted, becoming more aggressive. I could feel the danger in the air. His eyes darted around the room, sizing up the situation. I knew I had to act fast. I fumbled with my phone, pretending to dial for help, but he wasn't buying it. He lunged towards me, demanding my wallet. Fear propelled me into survival mode. I screamed, hoping someone nearby might hear. The struggle was chaotic, my mind racing with thoughts of escape. I managed to break free, bolting towards the door, and ran out into the frigid night. The snow crunched beneath my boots as I sprinted to the nearest neighbor's house. I banged on the door, breathless and terrified. They opened it, concern etched on their faces as I gasped out what had happened. They called the police, and I stayed huddled in their living room, waiting for help to arrive. The police searched the area, but the stranger was gone,